Who is responsible for repairs when you offer a house on a lease and option to a tenant? That's what we're talking about today on the Sub2Deal Show. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Sub2Deal Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Occasionally we talk about other real estate investing topics, but it's usually something to do with creative finance, subject to, and just in general real estate investing. We're broadening our platform just a little bit here. You know, we haven't been very consistent with our podcast lately. Jody and I just got back recently from a 30-day vacation, I guess you could call it. And then not long after that, we left, we did an event down in Mexico with Bill Bronchick, and we were down there for about 10 days. You know, it was a lot easier to do this podcast when all I had to do was turn on a microphone and make a recording. Now that I have to be in front of a camera, it's a little bit more challenging. We're going to do our best to try to be a little bit more consistent moving forward in the future. But today what we're talking about is lease options. And I'll tell you, when I got started as a real estate investor, I went through the channels like most people do. I wanted cash flow. I knew that much. And I had all of the preconceived notions about being a landlord, I guess, that everybody else has, that tenants call you 24 hours a day and they bother you nonstop with trivial repairs and things that need to be done. So I didn't think that I wanted to do that. So most of you that know my story know that I got started, I didn't have a lot of money. I had really good credit. So I found a small local bank that would do financing for me. If I bought a house cheap enough, they would fund tax value on the house. So a lot of times I was able to get in the house with little to no money down. And we bought several that way. But I knew that the banks would eventually cut me off. So I knew I had to find a way to continue to buy houses because, the 10 to 15, I felt like I could probably get with the bank, wouldn't support the lifestyle that I wanted to live. So I had to find some other ways to do that. So I started exploring other options. And of course, the next step that I found before I discovered subject to and seller finance was lease options. And I bought a course on lease options like a lot of people do. And of course, the course that I bought said that you can pass along all repair responsibilities to your tenant buyer. Tenant buyer was a word that was used a lot during that time. I think now we try to get away from it because, technically your tenant's not buying the house. I mean, that's the carrot that you dangle out in front of them. Hey, you can lease this house with an option to buy it at some point in the future for a preset price or however you structure your lease and options. But the truth of the matter is, they are a tenant. It doesn't matter if they give you $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 down as option consideration. And listen, if you live in a market where you can do that, I think that's great. I think realistically, selling someone or offering someone a house on a lease and option, let's just say it's a $300,000 house. Now, we sell houses with seller financing. We truly finance houses for our buyers. They are true owners. They get all the rights of ownership, and we typically get 8 to 10% down. So on a $300,000 house, we're generally going to get somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 down. On a lease and option, my experience, and like I said, I got this course on lease options and I decided that was the way to go. And I did that for a while. 3 to 5% was the norm. And some states actually have a limit on what you can collect as option consideration before you're really giving your buyer or your tenant an equitable interest in the property, which would force a foreclosure. So it's really important to know the laws in your state regarding that. But the real topic here today is, can you pass those repairs on? And the truth is, you can put anything in a contract, and we see a lot of teachers out there that really push this thing. You have zero responsibility for repairs. And I'm going to tell you, in most cases, in most states, that's just not true. If you're out there driving around and you speed every day of your life, you're probably not going to get caught most days. But when you do get caught, you're going to have to pay that $200 or $300 or $400 ticket, depending on how fast you're going. It's a big difference between getting caught occasionally in front of a judge for expecting a tenant to do repairs and then facing a huge fine or some type of discipline from a judge that can impact your business for the rest of the time you're in business. I know when I got started and got sued, and that's going to happen, and generally the lawsuits are going to come from tenants that you deal with. That's fighting over evictions or whatever it may be. But we always went before the same judge in that court. It was a magistrate and civil court, and they had 2 or 3 different judges that rotated. But after you'd been in there a time or two, people knew who you were. So if you had a bad reputation in front of a judge or all the judges, in future cases, you went in there with them having some preconceived notions about how you did business, and it didn't work favorably for you. So let's say that you do lease options and you expect tenants to do repairs, and one sues you because their house becomes uninhabitable. That may be if you live in the South and the air conditioner goes out and you don't fix it and it's 110 degrees. Is that property habitable? Well, for possibly, but they may take you to court over it. So you're standing there saying, listen, judge, these people are on a lease and option, and they have the responsibility for repairs. Most judges are going to severely chastise you and tell you, listen, you own that property and you need to fix it. You may get in front of one occasionally that'll say, well, Mr. Tenant, you agreed to this, so you have to do it. But that's becoming more and more rare these days. So it's important to know when things, sometimes things sound good in the story. They sound good on paper, but in practice, they just don't work out the same. And we see that a lot in just in general in the real estate space. There are at least 3 guru real estate people for every investor on the planet, I believe, right now. And you really have to pay attention to who's teaching what. And you have to do a little bit of investigating. You have to understand what the laws are in your state. You have to understand what's probably going to fly and what's not. And a lot of times when you're new, you have to really, it takes some time to really filter that stuff out. When you've been around for a while and you've experienced some things, and I can tell this story because I've stood in front of a judge who told me the exact thing I said earlier. He said, you own that house, you need to fix it. And I didn't have to be told that but one time before I knew that it was probably in my best interest to go ahead and expect that on lease options, if I sold a house on a lease and option, if I offered, that's a better way to put it. If I offered a house on a lease and option, that I had best expect to do repairs. So, the way I solved that problem was, let's say that I had a $300,000 house and I put a tenant option E in the house, and we'd set a price, and they had a period of time to be in the house. I would just take $500 out of the option money they gave me, and I'd buy a home warranty. And then I would say, hey, Mr. Tenant, we've got a home warranty in place. And I would say, if you have a repair, all you have to do is pay the deductible. And that worked a lot better for me. And the tenants liked it because they knew if something needed fixing, they could get it fixed. It wouldn't cost them very much to do it. And I paid for that with the money they gave me as an upfront payment. So things worked out a lot better. A lot more stuff got fixed when it should, and we had a lot fewer problems. And I think that's a much better way to go than just expecting them to do repairs. I'll tell you another problem with expecting those repairs, and that's something called deferred maintenance. And you can expect, if you expect your tenants to do repairs, a lot of times you get a house back. And I'll tell you, in my experience, 90% of these lease option tenant buyers don't exercise their option to buy. They just don't do it. They don't have the money for a real down payment. They don't change the things that affected their credit in the beginning. And so they're just not ever able to get a mortgage. So expect those things, because that's the reality of what happens. Now, are there exceptions to that rule? You bet. I just had a conversation with a guy. We had a post on Facebook actually about this morning. And another guy who's a player, I mean, gosh, he probably buys 15 or 20 houses a month, but he's been doing it for 15 or 20 years. He has filtered through all of the BS and has a system in place. And when you're new, you just don't have those systems. That's why it's always best to find somebody that knows what they're doing and pay for their system, because they've got the scars. They've been through the stuff. But to get back to the original question, can you pass repairs on? Is it a good idea to do that with your tenant on a lease option? No, it's not, because when you get the house back, which you're almost always going to do, it's going to have a lot of stuff called deferred maintenance. So you're going to spend most of the money they gave you to get in the house to fix it back, where you can sell it or lease it to somebody else. So just be careful on those things. A lot of BS being taught out there. Be extra diligent in who you listen to, the real world stuff. I'll tell you, a lot of people, a lot of investors, a lot of new investors don't know much about what goes on behind the curtain, because most people don't talk about it. But there's just a lot of crap being taught, and you need to be able to decipher some of the stuff out there. Listen to your BS detector, and don't fall for something. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So that's all I have to say today about lease options. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week. We're going to try to be more regular with these things. Let us know in the comments what you think about passing repairs on to tenants. Have you done this before? Did it work out well for you? Do you have any tips for people on things you can do to make a lease option experience more equitable for everyone involved, to make it a good deal for you, to make it a good deal for the tenants that are in the house? Do you set your tenants up for success? Do you really want them to purchase the house? I've known investors before, their entire business model was set up on their tenant failing to purchase, taking care of the property, taking care of the repairs. 2-3 years down the road, giving the house back, the investor has benefited from appreciation. They've benefited from principal pay down on the mortgage. They get the house back. They get to sell it at a higher price and just do it all over again. I think that's a problematic business model. I don't think that creates the win-win situations that most investors talk about going after in what they do. Don't we talk about that a lot? We want to create a win-win situation in what we do. That's not a win-win situation. That's a predatory situation. And there's just too much money to be made in this business to treat people that way. So hope you guys got some information out of this. Give us a like or subscribe, and share this podcast with other people who may be able to benefit from it. You guys have a fantastic week. Get out there, talk to some sellers, and buy some houses.